good morning. It's August the 5th, 2002, and it's just around noontime at East Brewster. And I very much wanted to do a program with Bobby and my mother Ann about the wonderful cottage we have at East Brewster. And I'm sorry because I'm so much like my grandmother that it makes me very emotional. But I think that all of us will be very happy to have the pictures of my Aunt Barbara and my mother Ann and their memories of this place that just serendipitously happened to fall into the family due to the story that they're going to tell you. So,
And you're Barbara Balasa.
and I'm Barbara Ann Haskett Balasa, and I'm the oldest of 7 grandchildren, and they're now great-grandchildren in this family from the grandparents, and so the heritage goes on, and many people love this house and come here and visit. And I'm the caretaker at the moment because I, with my family, live the closest outside of Boston. But it is truly a wonderful family house full of many, many marvelous, extensive memories.
Well, I'm Barbara. This is Ann. But nobody had cars that summer except Herbert Smith's mother, who did meet them at the train station in Yarmouth and brought them down, which meant that everything was done on foot, or Herbert and our father would get in a canoe to go to Orleans to get groceries. And also you could find a great many clams, oysters, lobsters, and fish and everything just to live off nature here. So that was the kind of summer they had, with not really transportation in the modern sense.
And they had no electricity, there was no telephone. They dug a deep hole in the ground and put their butter and eggs and things down in the ground in a kind of a
To keep cool.
To keep cool. And they got what they got and ate it up rather quickly. And they had kerosene lamps, a kerosene stove, and I guess they had fuel oil. No, we had a kerosene stove. And they bought kerosene and brought it down, I suppose, in the canoe.
Subsequently to that, for many summers we rented various cottages in this area, on the Chapman property as they were built. We were in Beechnut Grove, we were in the Red Cottage, we were in the Honeymoon Cottage, and various cottages. And then in 1935, our dad, Dr. Harrington, negotiated with the owner of the Nickerson estate, the big estate next door, Addie Nickerson, to buy a corner of the property, which she sold him, 1 acre and a quarter, which is what this cottage sits on now. And his friend Herbert never thought she would sell anything, but Herbert's mother, Grandma Chapman, was a charming lady with a will of iron, and she was a good friend of Addie Nickerson, and I think she helped to persuade Addie that we were worthy. So, a year later, Daddy had drawn a lot of plans himself. He really designed this place, and the cottage was built.
Yes. And we had to get a right-of-way from the Chapman estate to come down their road. We still have a right-of-way, and we built a small road off the right-of-way, the road, into this place. And Daddy negotiated all winter long with the Nickerson Lumber Company and with Sears Roebuck for various kinds of plumbing and lumber and all the things. He was very good at planning. He never had a house built. But he got hold of a couple of carpenters named Mr. Burke and Mr. Weaver. And we called them Mr. Work and Mr. Beaver because they were so industrious. And they built this cottage, including, Daddy did a lot of the plumbing. And I think we had Lathams come and do some more of the plumbing. There's still a Latham plumbing concern in town. But for the wood part of the cottage was built by the two carpenters.
In about 6 weeks.
It's about 6 weeks. And Our father built a lot of the screens. Now, I'm not sure he built all of them, but there's screens in every window, including the porch, and he did that while they were building the main part of the cottage. I think the screen doors were bought whole, but these screens on the porch, I think he built.
What did he use the design for the cottage from? Had he looked it up in
Oh,
magazines?
It's a Cape Cod cottage. Yeah.
Yeah.
It is, from the outside, it looks like an old Cape cottage. The roof comes right down to the top of the windows. There's dental molding all around between the roof and the walls of the cottage. It has white cedar shingles on the outside and white trim, and did have red cedar shingles on the top of the roof. You don't use the same kind of shingles on the top and the side. And when this cottage was built, there were just a few little bushes and beach grass and sand and small oak trees, maybe 5 or 6 feet tall, on this property. There wasn't any growth of any kind. In fact, there wasn't any growth on the Smith property or the Chapman property much, except up the road.
And we had, of course, no electricity. We had kerosene stove, kerosene lamps. The iceman used to come over the dunes with the ice on his back held in a big tong for the ice box. And he was also the fire chief of Brewster. So it was good that he knew where we were, just in case. And we lived rather simply. I mean, there was no electricity, so you read by kerosene lamp and went to bed early and that sort of thing. And I was 14 the summer it was built, and I was here all summer. We were in an adjoining cottage while it was being built, and then moved over. And I had a very bad case of poison ivy that summer, and we helped paint all the trim on the windows, all the interstices, or whatever they are, and I embroidered a simple kind of Cape Cod map which still hangs over the fireplace today. It says Barbara Harrington, age 14. And Anne was 18 that summer, and she was here part of the time and counseling part of the time.
And my dog was here. He turns up in all the pictures. In fact, his footsteps are on the ceiling of the upstairs bedroom. I mean, he walked over the lumber with his muddy feet and his little footsteps. He's been dead for many, many years.
He was a Scotty.
He was a Scotty.
His name was Hamlet.
And yes, his Hamlet was there.
So as the wood was lying on the ground,
While the wood was lying on the
he
ground, he
stepped
came
on
to
it, and then it got
supervise.
put on the ceiling.
He came to supervise.
It wasn't until after World War II that we got electricity, and in some ways that's very evident because a lot of the wiring shows.
What was it like here during World War II, as far as the way you had to keep the cottage closed up?
Oh, we had to pull blackout shades down if we had the lights on in the evening, and there was a warden that paced the beach, and if he saw a crack of light, he came up and reprimanded you for showing a crack of light because they thought the Germans or somebody was going to invade. There had been a German submarine in World War I that stranded near Orleans, and everybody was really paranoid. And Anne and I did plane watching from the cupola of the town hall. They showed us outlines of planes, and we were to report when the enemy flew over. But we
So
never.
you were volunteers.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
we were doing our war bit, you know. But no enemies ever flew over, just some seagulls and things.
So how old were you then? Were you a
Oh,
young woman?
well, let's see, I suppose I was in college. I was in my late teens. And I don't know, Anne came and went to different jobs and counseling and stuff, but she might have been in her early 20s.
Mm-hmm.
They had rationing and
Oh, yeah. Daddy bought a separate car to use down
An
here.
old second-hand car.
Old second-hand car. And then, I don't know how they got back and forth to Syracuse, but gas was rationed, meat was rationed, except you could eat all the duck you wanted. And we had duck about every Sunday from Mayo's Duck Farm, and squash biscuits. And I don't care if I never see another duck. Oh yeah, there were all kinds of wartime things. One time I got some black market steaks in Boston and put them in my suitcase to bring down, which black market, of course, was not quite legal, no ration stamps. And when I opened the suitcase, they had bled all over my clothes.
Oh.
But you know, in a wartime, you do what you have to do.
Yeah.
And then after the war, lo and behold, electricity,
Yeah.
which was rather an improvement in many ways.
Talk about some of the fun that went on here in the summers with the Smiths. And
Well, we made our own amusement. There was a kind of a old-fashioned movie theater in Orleans. It wasn't the seats were all on the floor. I mean, you looked up
Level,
at the
level.
on the level. You looked up at the screen, and maybe once a summer, if there was something good, we went to the movies. But mostly, we planned entertainment during the day. Of course, there was a tennis court, which there isn't anymore, and a lot of people played tennis. Some badly, like me, and some better, like our father and Winslow Smith and Herbert Smith and some of the others. We also had on the tennis court when we were playing tennis, somebody brought a wind-up Victrola and English folk dance music, and we did gathering peas, cods, and all sorts of English folk dances on the tennis court, and had a good time. That was during the day. And if we weren't doing that, we were swimming or going kayaking or sailing or building boats. Now, we didn't build any boats, but the Smiths did.
talk about that. That's
And
very interesting.
Herbert Smith, who was very charismatic, would be in charge of the boat building, but we all got involved. I mean, I got very good at caulking between the cracks and that sort of thing. And we all got to sail. And I remember one it was a two-master. Was it called Winnie the Pooh?
It was called the Pooh.
The Pooh had a picture of Winnie the Pooh on the sails.
Yeah.
And in the evenings we would gather and either play wonderful games like charades, of course. Daddy,
Murder.
We played murder, we played charades, but I especially think of charades where we acted out the most complicated words, and I can always picture my father, Dr. Harrington, as Julius Caesar in a striped beach towel with a colander on his head. for a helmet.
I never heard that.
Declaiming! And the funny thing was that everyone was involved. Grandma Chapman, who must have been around 90, and little 2-year-old kids. Nobody was left out, you know. And on rainy days, we would sometimes play cards or whatever. And we had nights where we did a lot of singing, and not just plain singing. Herbert Smith was a headmaster of a big private school, and he would bring all the choral music. So we would sing mostly a cappella, Bach, Sibelius, all this stuff. And it was the most glorious fun you can imagine. We just loved it. I loved it.
Talk about Mr.
Everybody here were special persons. There was the Smith family and our family,
and
the
the Green
Greens family.
Yeah.
And one of the Greens, Eleanor, married one of the Smiths, Winslow, and so on and so on. And now their children and grandchildren are still coming here. So is most everybody else's that feels the special feeling of the place.
How many generations have come here now?
Well, starting with
The Chapmans?
the Chapmans, that's one, two, the Smiths, three, their children, four, five generations.
Or
After the war, and I don't know just when, maybe Ann does, the upstairs, which had been really all the way open, was the rooms, the two upstairs bedrooms were separated, and Daddy, I think, did most or all of the work himself, put in a bathroom, or a half bath upstairs, wash bowl and potty. And so that made the house more livable. But when it was first built, Anne had a bed at this end, I had a bed at that end, and we used to do funny things and say funny poems to each other across the whole length of the house.
Yeah, we should inform
In
you.
Donald Duck talk. I mean, it's not relevant, but
What imitate some of it? What did you used to do?
well, we one of our specialties was Old Ironsides.
Yeah.
Sort of, I'll tear her tattered eggs right down along the Leyland Hut.
And a man on the ocean sea will sail to the war.
So you were, when you
We were younger ones.
This is when you're 14 or 15?
Oh, no, we were older than that. We were 19 or 20, but we were silly.
You
Well,
still are.
You were 19 or 20. I was, of course, a lot younger. Well, a little younger. Well, some young. Well, dang it.
So what improvements besides closing off the upstairs went on with the house? as the
Well,
years went
well,
on?
I get your water.
Oh, well,
Oh, yes.
there was a well. For a while when the house was being built, the Latham Company, the older man who's gone now, I mean, the oldest Latham, I think, is dead, but John is his son, where they were digging, not digging a well,
What,
but...
are you talking about Howie as the older man?
No, his father.
Oh, because there was a very attractive 21-year-old
We're talking about the well.
guy named Howie. Howie
The well.
Latham. I know Howie dug the well.
He didn't dig it. He drove something down.
Well,
didn't-
anyway, he
didn't
had green
dig.
eyes and red hair, and I had a tremendous crush on him and
Yes, he
didn't
was-
tell him I was only 14. Well, of course, it didn't go anywhere, but...
Yeah.
Is it on?
Uh-huh.
Okay. Well, what I wanted to say was, for history's sake, that when we moved here, the Nickerson estate consisted of the large tan house with the red roof and the large tan carriage house for cars and horses and so on with the red roof. And basically that was it, except for a little bathhouse. After some years, old Addie Nickerson died, and it was sold to a Catholic order called La Salette Novitiate, a Canadian order that trained young men to be priests. And I won't go into the current priest problem, but it does cross one's mind. Then La Salette hung on there about 10 years, and they were not really any trouble as neighbors. And then they sold it to
25
this...
years.
Huh?
25 years.
La Salette was
Yeah.
there?
25
Yeah,
years.
until the 70s.
25 years, whatever. And then it was sold to these people that developed this huge mess called Ocean Edge, which other people don't think is a mess, but and it hasn't been as bad as we thought, but it changed the beach very much, and we have a lot of people that want to use our beach who belong on their beach, and strange people sunbathing without much on and all that. So I will turn it over to my lovely sister and let her talk about whatever she's supposed to be talking about.
Your children grew up knowing their grandparents.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, most of the children, including Barb, had a summer when they came on either by themselves or a cousin from the other part of the family of the same age came when they were around 11 or so. And that happened with my children in California. Chuck came when he was 11, and Lydia came when she was 11, and Kathy came, I think, when she was
When you
12.
came and Nancy came.
Sally and Kathy came together.
Yeah,
'cause they
same
were the
age.
closest in age.
Yeah.
And,
Right.
For a while before,
And Mother and Daddy were really staunch, good people, because they were, in their 70s
Yeah.
during these visits with lively, youngish grandchildren, pre-teeners. But Chuck, I would like to put this in the record. He was here all summer when he was 11, and they called and said, could he stay a couple weeks longer and come back the day before school started, which we agreed to. When he got home, I said, Chuck, how was it? And he said, every minute was heaven.
yeah.
Aw.
So that was the summer.
And he'd
Nancy
been
was.
away from me for 2 months or
Well,
more.
that was-
He
that was a-
dare say that to his mother.
Well, I don't know what you were doing this summer, but Nancy was here too for a long time.
I might have been working.
Well, you may have been
Yeah,
working.
Nancy and Chuck were here, and Grandpa rented them a little rowboat or
That's
something.
right. Yeah, there's pictures of that. Yeah.
So wonderful. Every minute was heaven.
So they
got to know their grandparents. The
Oh, indeed
they
generations
did.
came together.
And the grandparents came to California about every other winter too, and stayed.
Well, they came to Washington Grove too.
But when they came to California, they stayed a couple of months, and we'd find them at a nearby apartment or house. They didn't want to live with us. One time, I just had some neighbors going away, and we borrowed the neighbor's house, and the neighbor was happy, and Mother and Daddy were ecstatic, and it was a 2-minute walk to my house. That was ideal.
Who?
The
The
Sumners?
Sumners.
Well, Grandma Sumner, we never got much of an impression of her. She was very quiet. She didn't smile much. Just sort of a nothing.
True.
Except she always served us canned grapefruit for breakfast when we
And she
were
made
staying there.
pies.
Oh, she made pies. But Grandpa was something else. He had been an adventurer as a young man, sailed around the Horn when he ran away to sea, and ended up in California for 12 years and had all sorts of adventures, so he said, like riding for the Pony Express, maybe, meeting a bear in the mountains, maybe. But he stayed in the West for like 12 years and wrote his mother occasionally, and then came home, I think, cross country, and never adventured again. But he was just a more interesting, lively person. He was tall and straight, had blue eyes,
Good looking.
and nice looking, even as an elderly man. He had just personality. And he loved Gilbert Sullivan, which was, popular in his day, and he used to sing us all the Gilbert and Sullivan things, and sort of gave me a love for all that stuff, and polish up the handle of the big front door and all that stuff, and so he was special.
You remember something, Mom?
And,
His name was Charles H. Sumner, and he was born in May of
Charles F. Sumner. Pardon.
1837. May of 1837.
1837.
That's right.
Before the Civil War.
Oh, he
yeah.
was.
Oh, yeah.
I
Wow.
thought he was Charles Henry.
Charles Frederick.
Whatever.
So there was a famous Sumner who was involved in the
That was some
War.
kind of a relative.
That was a relative. They shared something like a great-great-grandfather. I mean, there are many Charles Sumners. Very popular name. The senator was just one of, there's a Sumner book that I didn't bring with me that has all the Sumners that were born from 1640, whenever the first Sumner came over, until the late 19th century. And there are many Charles.
We must be about out of time, are we? Okay. I am now a widow and have been for many years. My sister Ann Haskett is a widow and has been for 8 years.
We managed.
We managed even so to get here every summer. Sometimes my sister has driven across the country, not of recent years. Usually she's either flown to Washington and we've driven down together, or up together actually, or she's flown to Boston and come down on the bus and we picked her up. And I have managed to get other people like my son Richard or my daughter Sally to drive me to Cape Cod.
Yeah, usually, quite often I've flown to Washington. Ann and I have driven up together. At the end of the summer we drive back together or fly home from Washington.
Yeah.
But now the house has been turned over legally to my niece, Barbara Balasa, and my own oldest child, Charles Frazier. And they are the legal owners. And
But the grand dames are Barbara Frazier and Ann Haskett.
oh, indeed,
Oh,
indeed.
yes.
And you're in residence for the summer? You come for the summer?
Well,
much,
we
yeah.
up till this summer, I'm not sure what we're going to do again. We don't
Yeah.
know.
We're not getting any younger.
Yeah.
Has it become harder to be here? Or you,
It's become harder for me to just make the trip to
Yes,
California.
it's been harder for me too, but I won't go into that.
And once I get here, I'm very used to living alone. I have to do
Me too.
a good bit of adjusting to a bigger family again. And sometimes I do that terribly gracefully, and sometimes I'm a real pickle puss.
Me too. Yeah. We're used to a lot of quiet time. Sometimes in quiet time, when I come from Maryland, at home, it gets kind of boring, but I'm used to it.
Yeah.
And we don't get a lot of quiet time here. Although Barbara Balasa tries to get us quiet time.
So how old are you now?
84.
I'm 80. I'm just a kid.
Just the baby.
But time marches on. And I was going to say that coming from California, like this year, my flight was at 8 o'clock. I live way up in the country. Got up at 3:15. And a friend arrived at 4 and drove me to the airport, which was 90 miles away. And then there was the all-day flight, and then there was taking the bus down to Hyannis, and then my nephew-in-law, Sally Haskett's husband, picked me up and brought me over here, but it makes for a very, very long day. And you think, well, one day, what's that? But when you're kind of old and creaky, why, it makes a very long day. And there may be a time will come when I just don't feel up to it. Like, we used to take a lot of trips, and I don't think either one of us feels up to a big trip
A lot of
right now.
We went to a nice elder hostel. We went to
Alaska. We went to England.
We went a trip around the islands of Britain.
Yeah.
Called, and the islands in Guernsey and Sark, and
the Hebrides
and the
Orkneys
and the Orkneys, and stopped in Edinburgh and came back again to the southern.
And that was when you were in your 70s? Or?
Oh,
it was
yeah.
Just a few years ago.
Just
Yeah.
about
Right.
6 years ago.
Yeah.
And the year after
Because
that,
it was
we
Dover.
did an elder hostel in French Canada, where neither one of us had been, although we grew up within almost
Spitting distance.
spitting distance, and that was fun. Montreal and Quebec, and then 2 years ago, this June, we went to Alaska. I mean, we each flew separately and
I too.
convened in Anchorage and saw the sights, and then had a cruise and all. But I sort of run out of steam.
But it's been a wonderful life.
Oh, I
And
guess.
this house has been a big part of it.
Yes.
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 What'd you say?
Down yonder green valley where streamlets meander, twilight is fading, I pensively rove, or at the bright noontide in solitude wander, amid the dark shades of the lonely ash grove. 'Tis there where the blackbird is cheerfully singing, each warmer enchants with his note from the tree. Ah, then little think I of sorrow or sadness, the ash grove entrancing spells beauty for me.
Thank you.
A musical finale is always so cheery, you know.
Well, I didn't even plan to contradict you. I didn't even consider it.
Are you feeling all right?